an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Veronica Mars, Season 2, Episode 19, Nevermind the Buttocks. In this episode, so it turns out that Kendall has some kind of connection with the Fitzpatricks that I did not see coming. And also, there is this weird situation that Veronica thinks maybe Weevil planted the bomb, but it turns out that maybe the Fitzpatricks planted the bomb. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. First of all, huge thanks to Jacqueline for commissioning this episode. Appreciate ya. Jacqui has done a few, and I see you, girl, and thank you. So, y'all, this episode just twists and turns a whole lot. There are some episodes of this show, and I think this is just going to happen when the seasons are as long as they are. There are some episodes of this show that really have nothing to do with the main plot line that I'm deeply interested in, and instead are just sort of case of the week. Like, I will say case of the week detours and distractions with bits of the plot I care about sprinkled in here and there. Thankfully, this episode was very heavy on the plot that I cared about, even though initially it didn't look like it was going to be. And also, it was very heavy on Veronica and Keith working together. And y'all know that I just love the two of them together so much. I was so worried after the episode in which she helps Duncan to escape. You know, Keith says something about how he just doesn't know that he's ever going to be able to trust her again. I have no idea if that's something that's like going to be a long burn, or if it's something that the writers decided to put in and then didn't follow through on. But as of right now, I don't see any evidence of that at all, and I'm not mad about it. This is one of those things that, like, as much as I want there to be consistency in storytelling and follow through and really, like, intense character development resulting from breaches of trust like that, I'm interested in that theoretically. I am not interested in that in any sort of practical way when it comes to Keith and Veronica. I want them to trust each other and be on the same side. I do not want him to be, like, suspicious of her. I don't want her to be so riddled with guilt that she doesn't know how to talk to him anymore. I am fine with this. So here we go. So the opening of the episode is Veronica being questioned about the tape, the sex tape that she saw of Aaron Eccles and Lily. And it's one of those, like, it really, God, guys, I don't know how I feel about the Lily Kane case still being an issue on the show. Like, part of me appreciates it because so often murder cases are not, they do not proceed as quickly as one would think. Sometimes they're over and done with, and before you realize it's happening, and you're like, oh shit, really? But then there are ones like this that there's a lot of hubbub around, which I think can lead to, like, some things getting pushed off, or, you know, there's just a lot of power struggle involved as well, since Aaron Eccles is a movie star and he's rich and whatever. And that this is the child of people who are famous and rich as well, who was murdered. But I was very startled to realize that not only are we still questioning Veronica about this, but also that they're going to bring up Duncan in this scenario. And, like, again, I'm not mad about it writing wise because this makes sense. Duncan ran away with an illegitimate child that he low-key stole. In this respect, he doesn't look great. And it makes total sense that the defense would be like, oh, perfect. Yes, look at this guy. He seems unstable, prone to impulsivity, which could easily be translated to violence. He is somebody who is very close to the victim. We love this. Yeah, we'll definitely use this. It makes such sense. But we haven't seen Duncan in so long, and I feel so like detached from Lily's case by this point that I'm having some trouble connecting with this part of the story again. Does that make sense? So later on, we find out that they discovered Aaron Eckel's Emmy, I think they say, like on the Kane property when somebody was digging to build a new pool, and that it has some of Duncan's hair on it. And it is the weirdest twist because, like, I don't know who bought the home. I don't know anything about like the people involved, but this isn't what happened, right? Like, this is 100% planted, unless the show is deciding that they're just going to be like, oh, psych, maybe Aaron didn't really kill her. But I don't feel like they are, because I'm pretty positive that Aaron flat out said to Veronica in the finale of season 1, do you think I'm going to jail over some like 17-year-old piece of tail or something like that? Right? Like, he basically confessed. Excuse me. Whew. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what happened. So, I think that as viewers, we are meant to be pretty confident that Aaron's really the killer. We're not meant to be like, oh no, what if we got it wrong this whole time? Are we? I don't know about y'all. Like, I know you can't spoil me on this, but if you want to tell me the perspective you had when you were watching this the first time, did you just assume, as I am, that this was a setup? Or did you start to doubt whether or not Aaron was even actually guilty? Personally, I don't doubt that Aaron is guilty so much as I am just a little bit unsure of what the show feels like doing. I don't know that I have a good enough grip yet on Veronica Mars as a whole to know if they would do something like that, sort of like retcon a different thing in order to create a new plot thread to follow. Because there are a lot of shows that do that. There'll be something that you think is sort of resolved, and then it sort of feels like the writers ran out of things to do, and they just decide that they're going to like go in a very different direction with that because they've like, it's already there and somebody figured out a way that's like somewhat reasonable to retcon it, and they're just like, yeah, all right, we'll just do that. I don't feel like that's what this show is, but I'm not totally certain of it. So we'll see. But I'm pretty sure that this is all a setup, especially considering that they specifically ask her about Duncan in this questioning. And then it turns out that his DNA is like on this thing that can be used as a weapon. Like, it feels very much like they are trying to connect the dots ahead of time. So remains to be seen. And yeah, the whole thing about like her having seen the sex tape and this lawyer being like, but they were covered in a sheet, so you don't know that they were having sex. And she's like, their body motion and the noises, it was definitely sex. And he's like, oh, really? Have a lot of experience with that? Do you? You big whore? Like, is the fucking subtext there. Dude. And I really appreciate, what's his face? Being like, I'm pretty sure she's had high school health and reproductive classes. I'm pretty confident she knows what that is, but it's fine. Cool. So we jump ahead then to her father coming home and telling her that he found out that the Casablancas have a life insurance policy against Dick and Beaver, and that if both of them died at the exact same time, that Kendall would stand to gain, I think he says something like $18 million, something like that. It was enough. He calls it that they were using it as a tax shelter. I'm not sure how that works. I don't know if I really need to know that. If y'all feel like I really need to know, then feel free to educate me in the comments. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure how that works out. But yeah, should both brothers die simultaneously, the beneficiary would be Kendall Casablancas. So the theory here is that maybe she was trying to blow up the bus, but she just didn't realize the two of them weren't going to be on the bus. And it's one of those moments where I'm kind of like, would Kendall stoop to that? In the moment, my knee-jerk reaction is just like, I don't think so. And then it's immediately followed up by, would she? And here's what I decided. I do not believe that Kendall is above killing somebody for money. Especially if she were able to do it in such a way that she was far enough removed from it that it didn't really feel like she was directly responsible. However, I don't see her for killing a fucking bus full of students for the sake of these two kids. I don't see that. She lives in the house with them. She has ample opportunity to take the both of them out anytime. And if she hasn't done it, that's not who it is. I was a little bit surprised that the fact that she lives with the two of them didn't come up in the conversation between Veronica and Keith. They don't really posit that as I won't say get out of jail free card, but as a crack in this case he's trying to put together here. And I feel like that really is the biggest, if you're trying to go after somebody using a bomb, that is somebody that you do not have a lot of confidence you will be able to get at in any other way, right? If you're going after somebody using a bomb on a bus filled with other kids who are innocent, you don't care about taking 10 other innocent lives. You don't think you're going to be able to necessarily get this person alone. And you're hoping, I would think this is a factor, you're hoping that the overall chaos of killing a large number of people at once might actually help mask your true motivation. I mean, that's part of what's been so difficult this season, right? Is that they aren't sure who the target really was. So they're getting pulled in 15 different directions in terms of trying to nail down who could possibly have had a motive. Because there are all sorts of minor scandals and secrets and whatnot involved with all these people. And if you're somebody who feels that going with a direct attack against one single solitary person would be too clear a line, where if somebody knew you were going after them, that it had to be one of these 3 things that you were going after them for, that would also narrow down their list of suspects considerably. That feels like a Fitzpatricks move to me. They obviously are not worried about other people's lives. They are not they're not clean criminals. There are types of gangs and organized crime out there that are very careful about their connections to things and about not wanting to take on too many casualties, civilian casualties. And that's not how the Fitzpatricks seem to operate in general. They seem like they are kind of relying on their reputation and just general physical intimidation and threats, especially this episode, it's really hammered home to us that they have a presence in the community that means something. And that is how they get shit done. So I feel like it lines up pretty well with the way that they function. I will say this, though. I am constantly surprised by what human beings in general can live with having done. And as much as I try and really get down to the nitty gritty in this show with like assessing, do I think this person would have been willing to kill 10 people that were innocent in addition to this one person? When it comes down to it, anybody feels capable of anything. And it all depends on how far they get pushed. And I just think we all have our boundaries and our lines. And I do not feel like I know anybody on this show, other than a few core characters, well enough to really, truly make a judgment that I would be willing to like place a bet on. The only one that I'm sure wouldn't do it is Weevil, whom Veronica goes after, thinking that he did it because of this anarchist cookbook thing that turns up. Yo, Weevil did not do this shit, Veronica. And I am insulted deeply that you thought that. And I know he is too. And girl, what are you doing? Come on. You know he's not. You know better than that. Veronica. Ugh. Pisses me off. So, anyway, I've gone like way off topic here. But, so the first scene after the credits is the classroom scene where Weevil has to feed the snake a rat. Now, it's a live rat. Is this how this goes? Guys, have any of you had like a pet snake in school? I really would have thought you'd get a bundle of dead frozen rats and you would thaw them out and feed them dead rats. But he's out here dropping a full-size live rat into this tank. This feels not really accurate to the way this would go. But it does give us the beautiful line in which Veronica is sort of like making fun of him for being heartless. And he responds with, "I'll never feel bad for sacrificing a rat." And she gets this look on her face like, oh shit, what is that? And I'm like, oh shit. And then later on, she says something about how Thumper's going to miss the dance or prom or something. And he says, well, I'm sure he's crushed. And then sort of laughs to himself. And guys, I know it's like really morbid and fucked up, but like that shit is funny to me. I felt kind of bad, but I can't help it. Like, I'm not mad that Thumper's dead. He was a piece of shit. And he was working with terrible people. And he sold out his gang and his friend. And for what? For some money. Ew. Guy, you know? So yeah, I found that line really fucking hilarious, to be perfectly honest with you. And like, I don't know that Veronica's totally aware of what happened yet. Like, it seems like she just knows, oh, Thumper's missing. I don't feel like she knows about like the whole setup of everything. But I actually kind of like this because Veronica tends to find out a lot of things around the same time as the viewers do. And I don't feel like we tend to get the privilege as viewers of seeing like an entire crime carried out and then seeing Veronica figure things out later. Usually we get like hints of things here and there, but the hints are red herrings meant to sort of like mislead us as viewers into believing the thing that Veronica is believing at the moment, You know, like we are sort of meant to think that, oh yeah, she's on the right track. That guy's suspicious. And then it turns out it wasn't that, because we're being given the same misinformation she is. Us getting to see this fucking play out the way that we do, completely separate from what Veronica knows, is kind of a different move for this show. It's not like it never happens, but it's rarer. So for him to be like making these little cracks that she can't really get at the moment, I am extremely I'm curious about how she will feel if she does find out eventually what happened. Like, you know, they blew up the stadium, but they're going to have to clear all of that away in order to build something new there. And they're going to find Thumper's body. And will she put it together? Will she realize what exactly is going on here? I don't know if they'll be able to identify him or not. I don't know how long it will take, if it will even hit the news, you know, like who knows, but we'll see. Mac, meanwhile, is really upset because her cell phone interceptor was taken out of her locker during a random school search. Now, I don't really know why they're like targeting her with this search, if somebody tipped them off or what. But I almost feel like if somebody did tip them off, it had to be Beaver. I feel like Beaver, like, there's something going on with him that I still don't know about. Is Beaver involved with the Fitzpatricks himself? Like, feels like fucking everybody is, you know? And the way that he's been sort of working with Kendall makes me wonder if there isn't at least some inadvertent collusion going on there. I don't know. But she had that cell phone intercepted because she was listening in, or trying to listen in on his phone calls. I really like this because, like, she says, I've turned full crazy girlfriend, or crazy ex-girlfriend, lol. And Veronica gives her a sort of look, and she's like, you're judging me. And Veronica's like, no. And I'm like, yeah, you are. Shut up, Veronica. We know you are. It's fine. At the same time, though, Beaver was so weird with her that I can't help but, like, understand. There's a difference between wanting to spy on somebody because you're jealous and you suspect that they're, like, involved with somebody else and that they were lying to you and a lot of relationship stuff. This feels different. She's just like, what the fuck is up with this guy, like, in general in his life? It's not like it has anything to do with me specifically, I don't think. There's something else happening, and she's, I think, correct, but I don't know how long it'll be until we find out what that actually is. So she asks Veronica for help in getting it back out of the principal's office because Veronica has a key. But we find out that key, he changed the locks and it does not work anymore. So Veronica winds up having to turn to the principal's son, Butters. And Butters wants to take Mac to the prom. Now, Veronica agrees to this without consulting Mac, and then has the two of them in the same room without warning Mac ahead of time about this deal that she has brokered. Does this make sense to anybody else? Like, that just is the most silly sitcom-y situation. Like, there is no fucking reason to have these two there for this moment of getting into the office. Like, you don't need them both there. It's purely there for Mac to begin to realize what exactly Veronica has done in the moment as it's happening, which feels very, very much outside of the way that Veronica tends to operate. She's no fool. She would not make a deal like this, not tell Mac, and then invite the two of them in one place and wind up being surprised at the fact that Butters started talking about this. She would know better than that. This doesn't feel like a Veronica thing to do. I don't understand it. But it doesn't really matter in this episode. I just like Mac, and she deserves better than fucking Butters, who really, man, does he embody a high school creep or what? Like, he looks the most like a high school student of anybody on this show, I think. And I don't just mean that age-wise. I mean his overall look. His skin just looks a little greasier than everybody else's. He's got that like struggle goatee that's like just on his beard. He's wearing this choker necklace that like doesn't really work on him. Overall, he's got the most dated look that like out of everybody we've seen since that fucking Paris Hilton character. And I just like, because he looks so high school, it makes me even more like, oh, Mac, no, don't do it, sweetie. So I guess we'll see how that goes. But yeah, this whole the whole thing with Veronica confronting Weevil outside, it's really ugly and it makes me upset. She's like, are you telling me that you wouldn't off the guy who killed Felix? And I'm like, you know, girl, that's not what you're asking, though. Like, you're asking, would he kill a bus full of people to off the guy who killed Felix? That's not exactly what we're talking about here. You know, like, she walks away feeling very smug, it feels like. And I'm like, that's not fair. So then we go to her and she's talking to this kid who had been like eyeballing her in the hallway in a way that made her feel very like weirded out initially. It turns out that this kid has a dog that got run over and somebody hit him and ran off. And he got a look at the make of the car, the color of the car, but he didn't see the driver. And it's so funny. He asks, is there any way I could pay you with meat? And she's like, what? And it turns out that he's a hunter. But, you know, initially. So, yeah, this leads to this thing with, like, tracking down who owns this car. And there are a few dead ends. And there, when she finally tracks down the owner, it turns out that it is a blind woman who doesn't drive it anymore, but it used to belong to her husband. And Veronica gets the idea that somebody is taking it out without her knowledge. And when she examines the car, she finds, like, she gets inside, she finds a gun in the glove compartment. And later on, we find out that she took the bullets out of it. But, like, you know, and I like this twist. It's not totally believable to me that a Fitzpatrick, a professional criminal, would leave a gun somewhere unattended and not check to make sure it has bullets when they come back to it. But also, people can be a lot stupider than I think they can be. You know, like, I give people a lot of benefit of the doubt sometimes that they maybe don't totally deserve. But I really did enjoy the twist of her being like ahead of this whole thing. So Veronica winds up being assigned a huge chunk of the newspaper that she has to fill. And she decides to use this space to buy an ad to ask anybody if they have seen a car of a certain description. And this leads to the mayor's daughter, whose name I will never remember ever, coming up to her and being like, yeah, actually, I saw a car of that exact same make, model, and color driving past us right before the bus crashed, and they mooned me out the window. And this leads to Veronica, like, all of her antennae go up. The fact that this car was anywhere near the crash at the time that it happened is deeply suspect to her. And if it is the Fitzpatricks that are behind that bus crash, yikes. So she winds up putting it together, and this, I'll circle back around to this later, but she winds up putting it together that the dog was hit on purpose because the dude's younger brother is involved with the Fitzpatricks and is involved in selling drugs and didn't have his payment ready in time. He didn't sell as much as he was supposed to sell. And this was their revenge. And he doesn't want Veronica to tell his brother the truth because he knows that his brother is very impulsive. He is angry. He isn't afraid of people. And that he will find a way to get back at the Fitzpatricks and wind up in jail because he killed somebody. Now, I think this kid thinks a little bit too highly of his brother. He's acting like the biggest thing to worry about is his brother going to prison. I think the biggest thing to worry about is his brother killing one of the Fitzpatricks with a very signature move, like an arrow that is fletched a certain way. Like, he would do it. They would know it was him. They would find him. They would kill him. The police wouldn't probably even factor into it. But Veronica winds up heeding this kid's wishes, even though it obviously rubs her the wrong way that she is having to keep to herself information that she found out about somebody who is responsible for something really hideous. Killing an innocent animal, you know, like, especially with being hit by a car, sometimes they will die immediately and not always. There's potentially some really like awful suffering involved. And that is just such a low, shitty thing to do. So she wants the Fitzpatricks held responsible, but she also recognizes what this kid is saying about his brother, especially like every time that she goes and checks on this kid, he's like, you know, practicing archery and skinning animals or making arrows or whatever. Like, this is a kid that definitely has a connection to the violent aspects of nature and life. I feel like she realizes what this kid is saying isn't just him trying to keep himself from getting in trouble, because I think that's what she thought initially, was that he was like, oh, if my brother finds out I'm the reason they killed his dog, he'll be so mad at me. But as she gets to know this kid a little bit better, she starts to be like, oh no, I think he was actually like telling the truth, because his brother seems a little bit scary, just a little bit. So I kind of liked that plot line ended with her not telling him. I don't know how many times we've had that happen on this show, her not sharing with somebody the information that she found. But there's also this other interesting plot line. I say interesting, even though I'm not totally sold on it. Jacqui's family's assets have been frozen, and she wants a job at the Java Hut. And Veronica is already working there, could, you know, give her a reference. And Veronica's like really weird about the fact that she wants a job. She doesn't get it. Like, until Jacqui explains, like, no, they have my money. Like, I can't do anything with it. I'm going to need some kind of income. So Veronica agrees to talk to her boss, and she winds up sort of having to put herself on the line. Her boss is like, you know, we have a bunch of applications of other people who want to work here. And Veronica says, I will vouch for her. And she's like, you'll vouch for her, and if she sucks, you will fire her. And Veronica agrees. And I was like, I really liked the way she played that scene, because she's like very like nodding, like yeah, I'll vouch for her. But then if she sucks, you'll fire her. She kind of has this look like, oh, I didn't know it was going to be like that. But she sort of reorganizes her brain and is like, no, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll do that. So it turns out that she did a good job in vouching for Jacqui. Now, this is, again, the show sort of trying to like shift the way that we see Jacqui, I think. How successful was this for you guys? Curiosity. I just wonder, because I feel kind of bad that I keep getting shown that maybe Jacqui isn't as bad as she seemed to be at first, and I'm just having a lot of trouble buying it. Like, I guess it's kind of a good thing in terms of the show having sort of complicated characters, because they sort of did this with Logan as well. They made Logan a real piece of shit. Then they started to sort of dial back on that and had him and Veronica get involved. But then they seemed to sort of go out of their way later on to be like, well, Logan has his good points, but he's also still a really privileged, bratty, shitty kid. So maybe even though he has some good in him, if it's not nurtured enough, it's going to stay inside. It's not going to come out. And I'm a little bit worried at like getting about giving Jacqui chances, and then the show like kind of turning around and being like, ha ha, no, she really sucks though. Like, I don't want to get fooled. And I just disliked her so much so immediately that this slow turnaround for her, I'm not sure if it's enough, is all I'm saying. Like, she's helped them a couple of times with like some cases and things. She's been better to Wallace. The fact that she's like got a job and actually showing up, I feel like we're supposed to be surprised by. I'll admit, like I kind of wondered if she wasn't just going to like tell Veronica she needed a job and then complain a lot and not really like do what she needed to do. But she's there for it. I just don't know if it's enough. And Wallace liking her is one of those things that like I don't really see what the draw is for him other than the fact that she's really pretty. Like, she has not been awesome to him in the past. She was not awesome to Veronica, his like best friend. And overall, it just like, I understand her attraction to Wallace because he's a good dude, but it just feels like, I don't know, there's something so perfunctory about it, about the two of them like needing to be together, that I'm just sort of whatever. But we'll see. Maybe she'll continue to grow on me. It's just, I have trouble forgiving things sometimes, especially when it doesn't feel like the person who committed whatever insult or, betrayal seems to really understand what it is that they did. And I don't know if Jacqui does. I feel like she has the capacity to get it, but I don't know about her as somebody who is particularly like self-reflective and able to own up to her mistakes and do better. So we'll see how this goes, is what I'm saying. So Veronica comes home and Keith is on the couch and he asks, can you think of any reason Logan Eccles would have gotten 3 calls from Kendall on the day of the crash? Now, this does feel suspicious considering the fact that Aaron's old stunt driver was like the one that washed up. Like, it feels like there's a connection between the bus crash and the Eccles, but I don't know. This is when Veronica has to tell her dad that Logan was fucking Kendall, even though Kendall was married to somebody else. And it's just a combination of just like, not only was she married, but Logan's a fucking high school student. Like, what the hell? And Keith thinks like he's about to say something to Veronica like, oh, really? And you knew about this? And she has to hasten to say, not until after it happened. So she has to go and talk to Logan about whether or not they were together on the night of the crash. And of course, you know, he's an asshole the way that he be, and finally does tell her that like, yeah, they were together, but she kicked him out hours before the crash actually happened. So, you know, because they think that maybe it was set off by a cell phone, that maybe Kendall could have set the thing and then press buttons from, you know, beside the pool and set the thing off from the comfort of her own home, which is one of those things that is really fucked up. That's a possibility, but yikes. And she explains that Kendall stood to make millions, sending Dick and Beaver off the cliff. And Logan says, listen, Kendall needs a full staff just to make a bowl of cereal. I don't really see her managing this kind of cloak and dagger bullshit. I am extremely curious at this point because that was the impression I had of her too. But once we start to find out what's really going on with Kendall, is she a pawn in somebody else's setup? Or is she just way more capable than she has let anybody know? I can't decide. So, all right. I'm trying to because there's so much happening in this episode. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm hitting as much of each plot line in full as I can. Oh, right. Okay. So let's talk about what's going on with Kendall first, because I already pretty much talked about Jacqui and Wallace. Wallace is really concerned about why Jacqui doesn't seem to want to be around him. And it winds up coming to light that she got accepted to a school in Paris, and she's really worried about getting attached to him just in time for her to leave and feeling really shitty about it. And while this is a totally understandable concern, I think Wallace is right, where he's just like, look, maybe our hearts will be broken later, but we're not in later. We're in now. And maybe we should just have a good time for right now. I think that's a good attitude. So, okay, Keith comes over and shares his discovery with Veronica. And Veronica is so distracted by this whole thing with the friggin' car that she doesn't give him the credit that he deserves. So let us give Keith the credit that he deserves. He hands her Kendall Shiflett's high school yearbook. And it turns out Kendall is not Kendall. She was in the car when Kendall died. And that her name, I think, was Priscilla, if I'm not mistaken. Now, this is the thing that I am very curious about. Did the original Kendall die on purpose? Was she murdered with this car accident? Because this changes who Kendall is in your head, right? And I don't mean that in the literal sense, which is, of course, also true. But our fake Kendall was at the wheel when the real Kendall was killed. So I think the assumption here is that she killed Kendall to steal her identity. It could be that the accident was just that, an accident, and then she decided to take advantage of the situation and steal Kendall's identity. But it doesn't look great. It does look like it was like a premeditated setup, you know? And he says, or the 6 months could have to do, or the name change could have to do with the 6 months she spent in prison for wire fraud. And we get to see her mugshot and, you know, fingerprints and everything, which, I would love to think that that's what it was, that like, it just happened. This girl died. She knew that she was dead. She also like went to prison on an unrelated charge. And when she got out, she was like, you know, we went to school together. Her name's going to be in all the records. There won't be pictures unless somebody goes and gets a yearbook. And what's the likelihood of that? I'm just going to take her life. That'll be so much easier. And I could really understand that, like, seeming like a pretty decent idea. But yeah, so Veronica, this whole thing, she winds up not giving her dad as much credit as he really deserves on this, though, because this is some pretty good detectiving. Like, there's no real reason that he needed to go into this girl's yearbook, and it turned out to really fucking pay off. So I wish that she had paid more attention to him when she could. But Veronica is at work, and she had also like planted a tracker in the car when she found it, in addition to taking the bullets out, which we didn't realize she did until later. So she sees that the car is on the move. The tracker has been tripped, and she's watching a map of it moving down the street. And she has to bail from work. And Jacqui is really, really nice about it. Again, with a thing that like, maybe I should just give you a chance, Jacqui, because honestly, it is her first night. And Veronica's like, hey, can you cover my tables for me? Okay, bye. Like right away. That sucks. But she travels to the spot where this car is, and she is watching as this person, they're playing some music and singing really loud and being very, very obnoxious. And she finally like tracks them to a spot where they like pull over, and somebody comes running out and talks to them through the window. Guys, how many of you recognized Kendall here in this moment? I didn't at all. Not even a drop until I heard her voice. Like, and really heard her voice. Not the like far away moment where she's talking to him through the window here where Veronica's like still got her camera up and everything. Like this, I did not realize it. And even when she like gets in the car, I think he's still inside. I just saw a flashlight moving around. I did not know it was Kendall. Still didn't realize. So he says, give me my gun out of the glove box. And Veronica's like, fuck. And she calls her dad, which like, I guess nothing's really happened yet, but I'm not entirely sure what she thought her dad was going to do. Like, it would have been one thing if her dad was still sheriff, but he's not anymore. So this choice just seems really strange to me, but for the story, it winds up working out. It just does, like, I'm not crazy, right? Calling him, I don't know. Maybe she was hoping that he could like pull some strings and let the cops know that this was like potentially going to happen without it looking as suspicious as it would if she called it in. But regardless, this dude gets out of the car. He's heading into the building. She calls her dad and warns him that I'm following this guy. I'm pretty sure that someone's going to get shot. He says, tell me where you are. And she tells him the northwest corner of X and Y streets. He says, pull up to the corner and wait for me with the engine running. If you see anybody but me coming toward the car, you get the hell out of there. Do you understand? And she says, where are you, Dad? What's going on? And he hangs up. And here comes this Fitzpatrick. I don't remember this guy's name. Is it Sean? Brian? Flannery? But yeah, he comes in and is very, very excited to come across Keith in a position that would allow him to kill Keith without getting into any trouble for it. It would be, you know, justifiable because of the invasion of property, the trespassing. And he is 100% prepared to pull the trigger. And I feel like that is a very important point that we need to really like sit on for a second. This is not a man who threatens and doesn't follow through. He pulled the fucking trigger. He was going to kill her father. He was 100% about to do this shit and was fine with it. And it's awful when Keith says, "Don't do this, please." And he just says, "I have a daughter." And he says, "We've met. Sweet girl. I'll keep an eye on her when you're gone." Which fucked up thing to say, man. Oh, you could see the camera like zoom in on Keith's face here. And I'm just like, ugh. Guys. Keith having to beg for his life from this motherfucker is the worst. The actual worst. I hate it. It feels so unfair. Ugh, I'm so mad about it. So he pulls the trigger and nothing happens. Keith realizes, oh shit, no bullets, and just fucking tackles him. And then Kendall gets out of the car and goes up to Veronica and says, "What are you doing here? Who's that in my house?" I can't tell if she recognizes Veronica. I think she must. Veronica's pretty distinctive looking, unusually pretty, you know. Her dad comes out of the house. There's no, I think she has to know who she is. So she must also know that her cover is blown, right? One would think. But yeah, Veronica is like, "Get the fuck out of the way." And Kendall does so and allows them to leave. But I have no idea what this means from here on out at all. And she then asks this dude, "What was the former sheriff doing in my house?" And he says he didn't say. And she says, "This is bad." And he says, "Yeah, I'm going to track him down and ask him." And she says, "That would be worse." And I am really, really dying to know what they're going to do next about this. Like, I have no idea what the connection here really is. Like, I really don't. Meanwhile, Veronica is driving away, explaining to her dad that she took the bullets out. If you hadn't hung up on me, you would have realized that. I would like to point out that Keith's like head and hands are covered in blood and abrasions. I guess it's just like scratching and whatnot and falling from the fight. But God, it really alarmed me for a second. I was like, dude, what happened to him? And she says, "So I take it that Kendall/Priscilla has a secret house." He says, "I take it that you figured out about the Barracuda." And they start talking about the connection to the bus. And he shows her that he managed to snatch Kendall's hard drive. So this is pretty huge. I have no idea just how long it will take Kendall to realize that it's gone. You know, it might be that they go back in the house and that's one of the first things that she looks at. Like, if there's important information on there, it would make sense for her to go to that first thing. But we see them accessing it on, like Mac is accessing it from the laptop. And I love that she says to Veronica, because she's talking to Keith and Veronica is the one who responds. And Max says, "Oh, I'm not speaking to you. Butters asked me if he should rent a room for prom night. I'm doing this for your dad." And Veronica sort of like smiles at this, like, oh God. So I just like, I kind of like the two of them. I really like Mac a lot. She's fun. So then we go to like an upsetting scene. Guys, I was not ready. I know that like here's the thing. The Fitzpatricks are like weird to me because I'm not really sure about them. Like, I don't know them well enough to be that invested in them as characters. And I can't decide whether or not I give a shit. All I know is that I care about the effect that they're having on other people. But in terms of like their influence on Neptune, it's a weird thing. I just don't know if this really works for me, you know? The main thing I'll say is that it feels like the PCHers were meant to be the gang that we were afraid of last season, and the show realized that we couldn't all root for Weevil at all if we knew that he was involved in the kind of shady shit that a gang would have to be involved in. So what they decided they would do was, rather than demonize the one like solid group of people of color on the show and make them all the dangerous criminals, they pulled in a white gang to shoulder that burden instead, and then have the PCHers being kind of like pushed around by them. It feels rather purposeful the way that this played out, because they realized the optics weren't awesome. And in that respect, I find the Fitzpatricks interesting just because they seem to embody the kind of ruthlessness that I was missing from the PCHers. And I mentioned this, I think at the start of the season, was just like, there are certain ways in which Weevil should have handled things if he were actually the leader of a gang that is meant to be dangerous, that he doesn't do, because we couldn't like him as much if he did. And I was a bit bummed by it, because I was like, I'm more interested in seeing Weevil as competent and a good leader than liking him, you know? But I do understand that this show is aimed at a slightly younger audience, in which sending that kind of message is something that they might be a little bit like leery about. So I do enjoy that we now have a dude in the story who would pull the trigger on her dad. That kind of person is, like, frankly, what this show has been missing. Somebody with that kind of ruthlessness and bloodthirstiness and willingness to just, like, let off steam in a way that most people would never even think of doing. But I'm not sure that having that element coming from a character that I otherwise do not care about at all. It's not even just that I hate this guy. I don't even hate him, because I just don't care about him enough. He's like a shitty person, but he also feels like a bit of a cartoon, you know? So, I don't know about this, but this scene was like really upsetting. So all of these Fitzpatricks show up to their meeting with the PCHers, and they're meant to be getting their payment for whatever the drugs were that they were trying to sell. And evidently, some of what they're selling is like Ritalin. It's not all like narcotics. It's some like, you know, prescription meds as well. Although those can fall under narcotics. Is it Ritalin a narcotic? I don't know how that goes. Regardless, these dudes did not sell what they were supposed to sell. They have not reached their quota today. And these folks are not pleased. Now, what he decides to do, the head Fitzpatrick, is take one of the young kids and loop him to a loading hook, which I'm pretty sure was what happened to Weevil a few episodes ago, and have his guys beat the shit out of him until the hat that he puts down gets filled with money. It's interesting too, because the kid that he picks is the one that we had not realized was even involved. The dog owner's younger brother. And it should be noted as well, he is not Hispanic. So I am a little bit unclear on his involvement with the PCHers, because I really thought they only let other Hispanic people in. I felt like it was a pretty tightly knit, like, cultural gang as well. Regardless, this kid already has a black eye. Like, he's already been put through some shit, but he winds up being subjected to more of this. It is rough. And it just, like, the overall treating this like a game is just so sick and gross. You know, he's like, Declan here is going to show us some of the jabs that he is so famous for. And everybody on the Fitzpatricks side is like cheering while he punches this fucking helpless kid. It is really rough. I mean, the kid looks like he's like 14. You know, I know he's older than that, but like he really looks like super duper young. It's gross. So they're in the middle of this, and who should roll up but fucking Weevil. And I kind of skipped over this thing, but Weevil comes to talk to Veronica, and he tells her that he needs to get into Clemens's office because there is a paddle in there that used to belong to Thumper. And she says, because he says something like it belonged to Thumper, and she's like, oh, really? Belonged? Past tense? Interesting. And I was like, girl, you know, come on, stop it. But the paddle apparently has some code on it, license plate, and I think last names. I think that those plates belong to the people he was delivering product to for the Fitzpatricks, and probably made it as some kind of insurance policy. So what Weevil does is turn up, tell the Fitzpatricks, oh, BT Dubs, I have all this information on your clients. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't love it if it started to leak. Gets them to back the fuck off on the PCHers. And then, of course, the PCHers, like, are willing to welcome him back with open arms and be like, hey, buddy, thank you. I knew we could rely on you. And he straight up says, you're on your own now. And they're like, wait, what? And he just gets in his car and fucking drives away. Damn. I love it. I love it. I'm overtime. I don't care. I'm going to be overtime. Listen. I really thought this whole thing of taking Thumper out was mostly so that he could get his spot back. Well, guess what? He just couldn't sit with the fact that this fucking scumbag had taken over his crew. But his crew also abandoned him. And he's not exactly like ready to forgive that. And I respect that. Fuck these guys. You know, if they're gonna just turn on him the instant that somebody's like, we could make some money, they aren't your friends. They're not people you can rely on. You know, they came running to you for help because their fucking guy that they were willing to like let you stand there and get beat on suddenly vanished, and that's the only reason? Fuck them. Fuck them. Fuck them. So I am delighted by this. And then one of the last scenes is Keith explaining to Veronica that Cormac and Kendall were partners working on the long con. She was his roper. That stint she did, I think she took the rap for Cormac and saved him a third strike. I'd say the rest of the Fitzpatricks owe Kendall a big one, and maybe Liam was following the bus could have been out there as Kendall's eyes and called her at just the right moment. So it's a weird thing that, like, again, I'm not feeling like I believe that Kendall would be willing to kill all these kids, but if she were far enough removed from it that she felt like, I'm making somebody else do it, I'm not doing it, would she still be okay with it? I don't have a good bead on what she is able to do. So I guess we'll find out. All right. So I think that's about it. And I think I covered everything. Thank you guys again so much for coming and hanging out and, listening to me rant and rave. And thank you to Jacqui for commissioning this episode. I really appreciate it. And I will be seeing you all again soon with a new episode. So until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.